I have always been a scrawny person since I was in elementary school. Granted, due to my semi-decent sense of humor, I was never bullied. But to the opposite sex, I was never deemed attractive or dateable. Friend zone was the nation I inhabited, and until the age of 25, I was completely fine with it. Of course, I craved the attention when it came time for the homecoming dance or prom. But I always managed to get a friend that went with me out of pity. After high school, I went to a local college and graduated 5 years later. I ran out of funds, so I worked in sales after my sophomore year to make enough money for my last 2 years. On my graduation day, I looked back on the years I spent in college and immediately felt regret. Every day after my classes, I would just go back home and eat dinner with my parents, and go to my bedroom where I would spend the whole night surfing the web and reading. I made a couple of friends and had a date that ended terribly. But I just felt like I never truly utilized college for all it's worth. I was accepted into an out-of-state college, but I decided against it because I did not want to get out of my comfort zone. After college, I tried to find a job that went along with my major, English, and found that it is pretty much impossible to get a teaching job in the town that I live in. After 4 months of looking for a job, I decided that any job was as good as any, and went to the local electronics store for my old job back. The manager was more than happy to take me back, as I was the top seller every month I was there. I don't like to go out and make friends, but I was definitely good at making people spend their money. When I came back for my first day back 3 days later, I realized that it was a completely different crew except the manager. There were 3 salesmen, Mac, Vance, and Jonathan, and the manager, Anthony. Before I came back in, Mac was the top salesman for the past 6 months, and we automatically did not like each other. Vance was the lowest salesman, but he always cleaned the store up and made sure all of the inventory was correct. Jonathan was the middle tier salesman, and we became fast friends. There really isn't much to talk about the world of sales. People come in looking for X object, and we sell them X object while trying to add on accessories. Sometimes we would get them to loosen on their original budget and go for a higher end model. That is about as far as sales really go to me. It gets me a paycheck, and I can pay the rent my mother and father suddenly started charging me. 3 weeks into working there, Jonathan asked if I want to come over to his house and hang out and drink a couple of beers. I agreed, and after work we went there and turned on a couple movies while downing beer after beer. After about 3 hours, I decided it was time for me to go home, but Jonathan rationalized with me about the dangers of driving drunk. He brought out 2 pillows and a blanket. He pointed at the couch and I sat back down. He put the blanket and pillows beside me and told me goodnight while he walked back to his room. I don't know when I fell asleep, but I remember snapping awake. I have this thing ever since I was young, where I would slightly open my eyes in case it's already bright. But I found the room to be completely dark. I slightly glanced up trying to figure out where I was, but what I saw made me close my eyes completely and start shaking a little. Jonathan was standing in the hallway while staring at me. I waited about 10 minutes and slightly opened my eyes once more to see that he was going back to his room. The next morning, I woke up to the smell of bacon. I quickly got out of bed and went into the kitchen. He was cooking and looking like his normal self, so I just let my paranoia slide off, and I asked him if he needed any help. With a wave of his hand, he just told me to sit down and enjoy my hangover. I sat down on the couch until he was done cooking and we ate bacon and pancakes. We went to work right after breakfast, and by the end I completely forgot about him staring at me in the middle of the night. The next weekend he asked if I wanted to go to a club an hour away from us, and without hesitation I told him yes. I told him I would wear my black suit to look extra spiffy, and while laughing he told me he would pick me up from my house at 10 p.m. Around 10:15 I heard him honking and I went outside and got into his car. When I saw him I had to take a double take. He was wearing the same exact thing as me, black suit and a white button-up shirt. I just decided to ignore it. We got to the club at 11, right as the doors were opening, and before it was midnight, I was having the time of my life. For the first time in my life, I was meeting girls that seemed to take an interest in me, and I even got to dance with a couple of them. The only thing that really threw me off was that Jonathan seemed to be staring down every single girl that even gave me a slight bit of interest. At 2 a.m., Jonathan came up to me and told me that it was time to go home. So I went to the bar to pay off my tab. While I was paying my tab, a girl that I danced with earlier came up to me and slipped a piece of paper in my pocket while giving me a light peck on the cheek. I know I blushed, but I maintained my composure enough to give her a wink and a little smile. When I got into the car, I took out the piece of paper and showed Jonathan, nearly bouncing in my seat with my excitement. I told him that she was definitely a girl that I would not mind dating. He asked me what she looked like, so I told him that she was a little shorter than me, brown hair and green eyes. Then I started to explain to him how pretty she was. But I noticed that he had changed his expression from happiness to what seemed like anger. The whole car ride was filled with awkward silences and sideways glances from Jonathan. I felt like he had gotten a bit too weird for me, so I started to avoid him at work. It worked for the first 3 days, but I noticed that he had started to follow me around. When I was driving home, I would see his car from a distance away. Sometimes when I was lying in my bed, I would spot a set of eyes coming from the set of trees in front of my house. But every single time I would walk up to the window, I would see the eyes vanish. I didn't really know it was him until I saw a figure with bright green shoes run down the street. I know Jonathan is the only person I have never seen wear bright green shoes. They were the shoes he wore whenever he went out running or whenever he exercised. I decided that the next day would be the best day to approach him and tell him that I noticed him following me after work and looking into my window. I was going to tell my only and best friend that I would really appreciate it if he could just give me some space, until I thought he was back to normal. That next day, the store was closed. The store was closed because Jonathan was found in the middle of the night by the police with a giant gaping hole in his chest. His heart was removed and placed in his mouth. Where his heart should have been was a credit card from our store. The magnetic strip was rubbed off, and the name and the card number was grinded off. On his stomach was a series of cuts to reveal a little note. Was it worth the sale? It says. I know I wanted him to give me some space, but I never wanted him to die. He was my only best friend, and the grief that filled my heart when the manager called and told me the news caused me to hang up on him and fall onto my bed. With deep sobs, I felt like the world was crashing down on me, and I never felt like he ever knew how much he really meant to me. Today is the day after Jonathan was found dead. I decided to go to the mall to clear my head. I went outside to my car and found a letter stuck in my window. I grabbed the letter and read it in my car. Hey, Jan, I'm sure you noticed that I have been following you around and that I have been acting weird around you. I know on the first night you spent the night over, you saw me staring at you on the couch. I just want you to know that on the first week, Mac convinced an older woman to make an 8100 TV purchase using our store credit card. The next day, the woman came back with the TV. It had a big crack in the middle of the screen, but she told us that it had come that way. Normally, we just return it and get our money back from the manufacturer, but Mac did not want to lose out on the commission. It was the last one we had in stock and he wanted to have an upper hand on you. She started to beg and plead to just take the TV back and let her buy a cheaper model. She told him that she didn't even have money to pay the monthly bill. He just told her that she was out of luck and made her take the TV back into her car. That night, she killed herself. She was clutching a remote in her left hand and an empty bottle of pills in her right hand. The daughter came in 3 days later. It was your off day, but Mac was there. She went up to him and told him about the death of her mother. She didn't seem sad, but I could tell she was not there to ask about what can be done with the bill. With a smile, she asked who the salesman was, and the motherfucker told her it was you, and described what you looked like. After that, with a smile, she skipped out the door and drove off in her red sedan. When you spent the night, I woke up to the sound of a car engine starting up around 2 a.m. I looked out the window and saw the same red sedan. When we were going to the club, I saw the red sedan following us. When you described to me about the girl that gave you her number, it matched what she looked like exactly. I just wanted to make sure you were safe, so I followed you home and I kept watch over you. Tonight, I invited her over. I took the paper she wrote you her number on and texted her. She said she will be here at 2 a.m. I know I may not be alive when you read this, but I want you to know that I love you, man. I know we haven't been friends for long, but just know that I acted like a creep around you because I wanted to make sure you were safe.